I never thought I'd notice the little details of her the way I do now. But there she was, leaning against the kitchen counter, coffee cup in hand, her fingers brushing the rim absent-mindedly, and I realized I'd been watching her for longer than I'd meant to. She didn't know, of course. She never did. My friend's mom, Elaine, mid-40s, with lines at the corners of her eyes that only made her softer, more human, more magnetic. I shuffled my feet, trying not to sound like a kid in her living room. Morning, I muttered, my voice too loud in the quiet. Elaine looked up, and something in her eyes flickered. Not surprise, exactly, but awareness. A small tilt of her head, a pause too long before she smiled. It wasn't a smile meant for anyone else, not really. It was the kind of smile that lingers in your chest long after the moment has passed. Morning, she said softly, setting the cup down. Her voice carried a warmth that made my stomach twist in ways I didn't understand. Coffee. I shook my head, but the words came out wrong. Sure, yeah. I watched her move around the small kitchen, graceful, casual, but even casual felt deliberate. Every step, every brush of her hair from her face, was a note I hadn't realized I was listening for. We didn't need to talk, though. The quiet filled the spaces between us, thick and electric. I tried to focus on the smell of the coffee, the faint hum of the fridge, anything to distract myself from the way her presence seemed to fold into my chest and make it impossible to breathe normally. You've grown taller since last summer, she said suddenly, leaning against the counter again, arms crossed loosely. There was no judgment in her tone, only notice. That subtle acknowledgement that she saw me, really saw me, made me feel exposed, like I was standing naked under the sun. Yeah, I guess, I said, laughing nervously. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Her eyes held mine, steady and unflinching, and I wondered how she could be so calm while I was turning into a mess inside. A car door slammed outside, and we both flinched, but not at the same time. She let out a quiet laugh that sounded like music tangled in smoke. It made my heart stutter. There was a pause, stretched out long enough for me to notice the faint tremor in her fingers as she reached for the sugar. And suddenly I wondered if she felt it too. The pull, the wrongness, the danger. But we didn't speak of it. We didn't name it. That would have made it real, and somehow, neither of us was ready for real yet. I wanted to ask her something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched her bite her lower lip, just slightly, and my throat went dry. I wanted to reach out and touch her hand, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. The tension hung there, fragile and heavy, until it was shattered by the doorbell. A harsh, ordinary sound that suddenly felt like a thunderclap in the quiet room. Elaine's head snapped toward the door, her eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second, something unspoken passing between us in that look. I wanted to stop time. I wanted to erase that doorbell. I wanted to know what would happen if we didn't step back, if we just let whatever this was spill over. But life, of course, had other plans. The sound of the doorbell lingered in the kitchen long after it had stopped ringing. I barely noticed who had come in. My focus stayed pinned on her. Elaine, my friend's mom. Somehow, that simple phrase kept bouncing in my head, like a warning I didn't want to heed. I remembered the first time I'd met her, years ago, summer before college. She had laughed at something dumb I'd said, a little too kindly, and I'd left with my chest buzzing in a way that made no sense at the time. Now, I could see her differently. The quiet confidence, the subtle way she carried herself, the scars hidden behind her laugh. She wasn't flawless. None of us were. But the imperfection made her human. Real. Elaine had been divorced for a while, I knew. She'd never pushed her past on anyone, but I'd caught hints in the way she kept certain pictures tucked behind others, or how she'd flinch at some offhand joke about men. Maybe there was guilt there, maybe heartbreak. Either way, it was mine to wonder about, not hers to explain. And me? I had my own walls. Being 20-something, I was still untangling the awkward mess of first loves, failed friendships, and the endless self-doubt that came with trying to figure out who I was. Yet standing there, watching her, I realized how little any of that mattered in this moment. The rules, the years, the impossible logistics, everything collapsed into the space between us. I knew the risk. She was my friend's mom. Someone older, wiser, untouchable by social norms and family expectations. And yet, every time she laughed at something I said or let her hand brush mine accidentally, it was electric. Forbidden, yes, but intoxicating. Every glance carried questions we weren't supposed to ask. I caught myself imagining conversations we'd never have, moments we weren't supposed to share. And then I felt the guilt creeping in. How could I feel this way? Why did it hurt so much to look at her and not touch her, to listen and not speak the words I wanted to say? Elaine noticed me staring. She always did. And instead of looking away, she let her eyes linger on mine just a moment too long. There was no shame in her gaze, no judgment, just recognition. "Remember that time your friend tried to teach me to skateboard?" she asked suddenly, a soft laugh hiding in her words. The memory caught me off guard. I laughed quietly too, the sound low, unsure, but it bridged something invisible between us. She reached for the counter, and her hand brushed mine. Not forcefully, not intentionally, but enough. Enough to make me freeze and feel that pull again. The mix of danger and desire that made my chest tight and my thoughts scatter. We held that silence, fingertips close but not quite touching, and for the first time, the unspoken tension didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable. And then I wondered how long we could keep pretending it wasn't there. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not this late. And yet, when I found myself in Elaine's living room, the soft glow of the lamp painting her face in golden shadow, I couldn't bring myself to leave. She was perched on the couch, a blanket draped around her shoulders, scrolling through her phone with that casual air that somehow made everything else feel wrong, like I was trespassing in a space I didn't deserve. "Hey," I said softly, stepping closer than I should. She looked up, startled, and then her lips curved in that slow, knowing smile. "You shouldn't be here," she said, though there was no real accusation in her voice. Just awareness. I couldn't sleep. I muttered, fumbling with my hands. My words sounded foolish even to me. Elaine's eyes softened. "I understand," she whispered, and that single line was a thread pulling me closer. Despite the weight of every rule I knew we were breaking. I wanted to touch her, just once. But the second I leaned in, my mind screamed at me. My friend, her life, our impossible age gap, everything. And yet, the pull didn't ease. It only tightened, coiling in my chest like a living thing. Then the sound of a key turning in the door made both of us flinch. My heart stopped. Elaine's head snapped toward the hallway, eyes wide, her lips parting. "Michael," a familiar voice called, calm but alert. Her ex-husband, or maybe someone from the neighborhood, someone whose timing was impeccable. My body froze. I'll go," I stammered, backing away. "No," she said sharply, standing now, her hand gripping the edge of the couch as though it could anchor her to reality. Her eyes found mine again, and in that look, I saw the same struggle I felt. Desire and restraint tangled so tightly it hurt. The moment stretched, heavy and fragile. I could feel the tension radiating off her in waves, in the slight tremor of her hands, the way she pressed her lips together as if holding back words. The door opened fully, and a man stepped in. Casual, unaware. Elaine's posture stiffened, polite yet guarded. I slipped into the shadows, watching the delicate mask she wore for the world. Once the distraction passed, she turned back to me, eyes dark, a sigh escaping her lips. "This can't happen," she murmured, almost to herself. "I know," I said, my voice cracking under the weight of my own longing. But even as I said it, our hands brushed again, just for a heartbeat. And that one fleeting touch said everything words could never say. The magnetism, the risk, the silent promise that neither of us wanted to end this. Not yet. And just like that, the line between right and wrong blurred. I wanted to pull back, to escape the chaos of my own feelings, but I couldn't. Every instinct screamed for distance. Every heartbeat urged me forward. And then Elaine did something reckless. She reached out again, her fingers hovering near mine, daring me, daring herself. My breath caught. The world held its breath with us. The phone buzzed on the table. I saw her glance at it, tension tightening her jaw. Whoever it was, I knew it would change everything. But for a moment, Just one moment. The room belonged only to us. I couldn't breathe. Every nerve in my body felt electric, wound tight with tension I could no longer ignore. Elaine was standing too close, too real, too impossibly human in ways that made my chest ache. She had that look in her eyes, the one that came when she was trying not to admit something, when she was holding back a storm. Her lips parted slightly, fingers flexing at her sides, and I wanted, more than anything, to reach out, to close the space between us. I shouldn't, she whispered, voice breaking just enough to betray her restraint. I know, I said, my own voice hoarse. But I didn't move away. I couldn't. My gaze locked with hers, and suddenly the rules, the age gap, the friend connection, all of it, melted into the heat between us. Her hand twitched, a micromotion I caught immediately. My heart lurched. I knew she felt it too, the magnetic pull that made every thought chaotic, every rational argument meaningless. I can't stop thinking about you, I admitted, the words barely leaving my mouth, trembling with the weight of what I'd just said. Elaine froze, eyes widening, and then she laughed, a short, breathless sound that vibrated somewhere deep in me. Michael. Her name on her lips felt like a spark, a warning, and a promise. She stepped back, just slightly, and I felt the shift in air, the tiny retreat that was both invitation and barrier. My chest tightened, fear and longing wrestling for dominance. Why now? She asked softly, almost a whisper. Why are you here, saying these things? Because I can't pretend anymore, I said, my voice catching. I can't hide it. Not from you. Not from myself. She looked away, biting her lower lip, fingers brushing her neck in a way I couldn't stop noticing. A tremor ran through her, and my chest contracted as if I could physically feel her hesitation, her desire, her fear. And then the phone buzzed again, sharp and intrusive, breaking the fragile bubble we'd created. Elaine's eyes darted to it. I saw the tension spike in her jaw, the faint furrow of worry in her brow. Someone else. Someone who didn't belong in this moment. I can't, she began, but stopped herself, words vanishing into the thick air between us. I reached out instinctively, stopping just inches from her arm. The proximity was torture. Every second stretched, charged, unbearable. I could feel her warmth, the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the rapid beat of her pulse through her wrist. Michael, she said again, voice trembling. And then, nothing. Silence. The kind that makes every nerve scream. We were standing on a precipice. One word, one touch, one decision, and everything would change. Forever. I wanted to close the distance, to feel her lips on mine, to see if this impossible, forbidden thing we were dancing around could actually exist. But the phone buzzed again, insistent, urgent. Her gaze flicked to it, then back to me, eyes dark, torn, shimmering with unspoken truths. And in that instant, I realized, nothing could stay the same. Not tonight. I didn't hear the knock at first. It was soft, hesitant, barely more than a whisper against the wood of the front door. Elaine, tense and alert, stiffened instantly. Her eyes met mine, wide, uncertain. I should get that, she muttered, moving toward the door. No, I said quickly, my voice too sharp. Don't. It's fine. Let me. She froze, a flicker of fear, or maybe caution, passing across her features. Her hand lingered on the doorframe, fingers trembling, and I realized she was torn between curiosity and the need to protect herself, me, us. I stepped forward and cracked the door open, and then my heart stopped. It wasn't the neighbor or her ex-husband. It was my friend, my actual friend. He looked furious, or at least hurt, something that twisted my stomach into knots. In his hand, he held his phone, open to a message I hadn't seen yet. You've been texting me, haven't you? He demanded, voice low but trembling. I saw your name on his screen last night. All those messages, what's going on? Elaine froze, eyes darting between us, a flush rising in her cheeks. My mind raced. How could this be happening now? We'd been careful, or at least, we thought we had. I didn't, she began, but the words died in her throat. I felt my own pulse spike. I wanted to reach out, to explain, but the words tangled in my chest. The forbidden truth we'd been circling, the magnetic pull neither of us could resist, had been ripped into the light. And now, there was no hiding it. "You, what are you doing with him?" my friend pressed, voice breaking, eyes narrowing. Elaine's gaze dropped, and in that silence, I saw everything she'd been holding back: shame, longing, fear. My chest ached. This was real. Too real. It's complicated, she said finally, her voice trembling. The small tremor in her hands mirrored my own. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to protect, to vanish, but I couldn't leave her there, not while she was on the verge of unraveling. I stepped closer, careful, deliberate, feeling the pull between us tighten like a wire around my ribs. "It's nothing like you think," I said softly, but even I didn't know if it was true. Her eyes found mine, and suddenly the room felt smaller. The walls pressed in. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, the way her breath hitched ever so slightly. She was trembling, not from fear alone, but from everything we'd been dancing around for weeks. Desire, guilt, curiosity, longing. "You can't tell anyone," she whispered, barely audible. "Promise me, please." And in that instant, I realized how high the stakes had gotten. The tension we'd been carefully balancing on a knife edge wasn't just emotional anymore. It was dangerous, messy, irreversible. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I promise," I said, though inside I was already reeling from the consequences of that promise, and from the truth I could no longer hide. Elaine's hand brushed mine as she stepped back, almost accidentally. The contact was fleeting, but it was enough to send every nerve in my body alight. And in that small, forbidden touch, I understood something terrifying and thrilling. We'd crossed a line. There was no going back. The air between us was thick, almost solid, charged with the weight of weeks we'd spent circling each other. Elaine stood across the living room, shoulders tense, eyes flicking to mine, and then away, back again, like she was trying to measure the danger against the desire. I swallowed hard. "We don't have to do this," I said, though my voice was weaker than I intended. My hands itched to reach for her, to close the impossible distance, but fear still lurked behind my ribs. She shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. I can't pretend anymore, Michael." And in that single sentence, everything shattered and reformed at once. The caution, the guilt, the rules, they all melted into the undeniable truth. We wanted this. Both of us. I stepped forward, slowly, as if measured movement could make the world safer. Then we have to be honest. About everything." Elaine's lips parted, and I caught that subtle quiver that always made my chest tighten. "I know," she said softly. "I'm terrified, but I can't deny it. Not anymore." Her hands trembled as they brushed against mine, tentative, searching, like we were both afraid the other might vanish. The moment stretched, a fragile bridge over the chasm of consequences we'd ignored for too long. "I've wanted this since the first time I realized you were different," I confessed, my voice breaking, carrying the weight of every stolen glance, every half-smile that lingered too long. "And I know it's wrong in every way, but I can't stop." Elaine's eyes glistened, caught somewhere between fear and relief. She took a step closer, closing the final inches. Her fingers slid along my arm, light but purposeful. "I feel the same," she whispered. "Every moment, I've felt it, and I've hated myself for it." But I didn't let her finish. I cupped her face, trembling, feeling the warmth of her skin under my palms, and pressed my forehead to hers. "It's not hate," I murmured. It's everything." For a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. No rules, no judgment, no consequences, just the pulse of our own reckless hearts. And then the quiet returned, heavy and intimate. We stood there, breathing together, fingers intertwined, words unnecessary. For the first time, the unspoken became real. Elaine rested her head against my shoulder, small, human, and entirely mine for this moment. I held her, aware of every tremor, every sigh, every stolen second that felt like it could last forever. I don't know what comes next, she admitted softly. Neither do I said, voice barely above a whisper. But I want to try. With you. She laughed quietly, a sound both shaky and relieved, and pressed closer. Then let's figure it out. Together. We didn't kiss. Not yet. Not because we didn't want to, but because this moment, messy and raw and real, was ours in a way a kiss could never fully capture. Outside, the world waited, full of rules and eyes that didn't understand. But in that room, for now, there was only us. And that was enough. Morning light filtered through the half-closed blinds, painting the living room in soft stripes of gold and shadow. Elaine stirred beside me, her head still resting on my shoulder, and I felt the subtle rhythm of her breath, steady, warm, real. Last night had changed everything. Nothing about us was simple anymore. Nothing about this, about us, fit the neat rules of the world. And yet, in that quiet, fragile morning, it felt possible. Somehow, impossibility had folded into reality, messy and beautiful. She shifted slightly, stretching her arms, and glanced at me. You're still here, she said softly, almost in disbelief. I didn't go anywhere, I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. I'm not going to. Elaine's fingers brushed mine again, casual, intimate. No words were needed. The silence spoke volumes. Our shared acknowledgement of the risk, the desire, the uncertainty, and the promise that we'd face it together. I thought about the world outside. The questions we hadn't answered, the people we had to protect, the consequences we hadn't yet imagined. And I realized that none of that mattered in the moments we claimed for ourselves. Not fully. Not yet. We had both crossed lines, broken rules, and confronted desires we weren't supposed to feel. And yet, we had done it honestly. No pretense, no hiding. The tension, the secrecy, the longing, all of it had led us here. A place where our choices were ours, messy and real. Elaine laughed quietly, a sound that made my chest ache. Do you ever think about how wrong this all is? She asked. All the time, I admitted. But I also think about how right it feels, right here, right now. Her eyes softened, and she leaned into me again. Then we take it one step at a time, she said. We don't need all the answers today. Just us. Just this. I nodded. That was enough. For now, enough was everything. We didn't know what the future held, or how complicated it might get. But we had this moment. We had each other. And for the first time, that certainty, however fragile, felt like something worth holding. We didn't need a dramatic kiss, a sweeping confession, or an unbreakable plan. We had the messy, real connection that comes from seeing someone completely, flaws and all, and choosing to stay anyway. That was love. That was risk. That was human. Elaine shifted again, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, and I reached for her hand, holding it lightly, letting her squeeze back. That simple gesture, so small, so ordinary, felt like everything. Outside, the morning went on. Life waited, relentless, demanding, chaotic. But inside, there was quiet, peace, and a new beginning we hadn't expected, but now couldn't ignore. We had chosen each other, and maybe that was enough.